When you visit the San Antonio Zoo, your visit goes to support wildlife and wild places, and the Japanese giant salamander is a perfect example. We're working with the species in the wild, trying to support populations with conservation initiatives, but we're also busy developing a facility here where we can breed them and hopefully produce the next generation of Japanese giant salamanders. The San Antonio Zoo has a rather unique circumstance in that about 2 decades ago, it was able to obtain a group of Japanese giant salamanders that were larvae at the time. And across the past 2 decades, we've been raising them up to an adult stage where right now they're just moving into reproductive maturity. The zoo is also building a breeding facility for these animals, and we actually have the largest breeding group outside of Japan. The San Antonio Zoo is involved with some research biologists in Japan, and these research biologists had identified one of the problems with wild populations of Japanese giant salamanders. And the issue is that in the wild, these salamanders live in these streams up in the mountains, and these streams are on an increasing basis becoming dammed. Using special laser-triggered cameras or time-lapse photography, the biologists are able to watch what happens over the course of an evening with wild Japanese giant salamanders. And what they found out very quickly was that animals were approaching the impediment and trying to pass the dam, but they couldn't get past it. Well, in Japanese giant salamanders, if you put in an impoundment that they can't get by, you functionally divided the population into 2 isolated groups, the group above the dam and the group below the dam. And anytime you make a breeding population smaller, what you end up with is a restricted gene pool. And whenever you restrict gene pools, ultimately across many generations, that can lead to really bad things. The biologists that we're working with looked at this problem and they started asking questions about trying to solve reconnecting these isolated populations on opposite sides of a dam. And one of the ideas that they've had is coming up with what is effectively a salamander ladder, very similar to a salmon ladder, where the animals are able to use this structure to get around an impoundment. And by doing that, you would reconnect these isolated populations and you would reinitiate gene flow between all of those animals. The San Antonio Zoo is looking at implementing salamander ladders and reconnecting these isolated populations of Japanese giant salamanders. Conservation doesn't always have to be complicated or expensive. Sometimes the solutions can be straightforward and simple, and that's the case with the Japanese giant salamander.